Hello, I want to talk to you today about something that happened to me last Tuesday. Or maybe it was Wednesday. I'm not always good with days, they kind of blend together in this time of year. But it was definitely cool outside. The kind of cool where you can see your breath if you're standing still long enough, which I was, because I was trying to figure out how to fix my dad's old snow shovel. You know, I think that's where I should start, with that shovel. My dad gave me this shovel years ago. Not like he sat me down and said, I want you to have this shovel, and I'm going to teach you something important about life. No, it wasn't like that at all. He was just busy, you see. He was always busy. Still is, actually, but he's less busy now because he's retired, and I don't think he quite knows what to do with himself. But back then, when he gave me the shovel, he was the kind of busy that doesn't leave much room for teaching anyone anything. He was a manager at a manufacturing plant about 30 miles from here. He'd leave early in the morning, before the sun came up, and he'd come home after it had already gone down. In winter, I'd watch him through the kitchen window, and it would be dark when he left and dark when he arrived. I don't know if that's poetic or just sad. I think maybe it's both. The shovel, though, he handed it to me one November morning. I must have been maybe 16, and he said, "You're going to need to learn how to do this." And then he went to work. That was the whole lesson. Here's a shovel. Learn how to do this, and he was gone. I want you to know that I don't think he was being unkind. I really don't. I think he just didn't know what else to do. He was so tired from being busy that he couldn't find the words or the energy to actually show me anything. And so you end up learning by doing it wrong, and then doing it again, and eventually you figure it out. That's not really a lesson, is it? That's just time passing and necessity pushing you forward. But here's what's interesting to me now. Here's what I've been thinking about. My dad never taught me how to shovel snow, that's true, but also he did teach me, just not in any way that looked like teaching. Let me try to explain this better because it's a little tangled in my head and I want to get it right. There's this moment that happens in late fall when you realize summer is completely gone. Not like when it gets cold, that's obvious. But there's a moment before the snow, usually in November, where the grass is still visible but it's dead and brown and all the leaves have fallen down, and you're driving past the houses in town and you can see into them now because the trees don't have any leaves. You can see their living rooms. You can see where people are sitting on their couches at 6 o'clock in the afternoon because it's already dark. That moment always makes me think about my dad because he was someone who lived in those lit windows. He was always inside, in some room, working or thinking about work or recovering from work. And when he came home to our house, he was so depleted by the business of everything that he didn't have much left to give. I think that's just true. I'm not angry about it anymore. I'm actually, I don't know. I'm sad about it in the way you can be sad about something without being angry. Does that make sense? When you're young, you don't understand that your parents are also just people doing the best they can. You think they know something, you think they're going to teach you how to be. And then you wake up one day and you realize they're just as confused as you are. And they're tired, and they made mistakes, and they didn't say the things they meant to say. And now you're an adult, and you're supposed to know how to do all these things. And a lot of the time you don't. So that's what I've been thinking about. The lessons that never came. But here's where it gets interesting. Because it's not like I ended up knowing nothing. It's not like I grew up completely lost. I learned things, just differently. I learned how to shovel snow by doing it. That first winter, I did it badly. I threw out my back a little bit. I left snow piled up in weird angles around the driveway. I didn't understand about the physics of it, where to angle the shovel, how to move from your legs instead of your back, when to just take a break because it's too cold and your hands hurt. But I learned. And I think what I'm realizing now, as an adult, is that sometimes the lesson is not the thing your dad says to you. The lesson is the time you spend figuring it out yourself, and the slight back pain, and the cold hands, and the next year when you do it a little better. The lesson is all that time in between, where you're actually becoming someone who knows how to do something. And maybe that's what my dad was trying to teach me, in his way. Maybe he knew that I couldn't learn how to shovel by having him explain it. Maybe he knew that I needed to feel the shovel in my hands, and feel the snow's weight, and feel what happens when you do it wrong and your back hurts the next day. Maybe not knowing what to say was, in a weird way, exactly the right amount of information. Or maybe I'm just making excuses for him now, Because I'm older and I understand how hard it is to be a person and do a job and come home exhausted and still try to be a father. Probably both. Let me tell you what happened last Tuesday, or Wednesday. It was cool outside, like I said, that time of year where fall is definitely over but the snow hasn't really come yet. The grass is brown and everything is waiting for something. The sky is grey, in that particular grey that only happens in late autumn. It's not sad exactly, but it's serious. The sky looks like it's thinking about something. I was out in the driveway. I don't know why I was out there. I think I was just avoiding being inside. And I saw that the shovel was leaning against the garage, and I noticed that the handle had cracked a little bit. Just a small crack near the bottom, but if you didn't fix it, it would get worse. The handle would eventually split, and then the shovel would be broken, and you'd have to buy a new one or try to replace the handle, which is complicated and annoying. And I thought, I should fix this. I should show someone how to fix this. And then I realized that there's no one to show. My dad doesn't live here. I don't have kids. I just have this shovel with a cracked handle, and I have the knowledge that I learned on my own how to live in winter, and there's no one I'm passing it on to. That's when I started thinking about all the things he never taught me. He never taught me how to tie a tie properly. I learned that from the internet, actually. YouTube. Some man with a very calm voice showing me the steps. My dad wore a tie to work every day for 40 years, and he never once showed me how to do it. He never taught me how to fish, even though he goes fishing sometimes. I don't know if he wanted to and didn't know how to ask, or if he just didn't want to spend time with me in that way. I've never asked him. He never taught me how to use a hammer correctly. I learned by breaking things. I learned by hitting my own thumb. I learned by having to fix my mistakes or pay someone else to do it. He never taught me about women or money, or how to know when you're making a mistake that's going to affect the rest of your life. He never taught me how to talk to him. He never taught me what to do when you're lonely, but you have people around you. He never taught me how to forgive people when they hurt you. He never taught me how to forgive myself, and I've been thinking, he never taught me any of these things, but I learned all of them anyway. Not because he was a bad father, not because he didn't love me, but because he was busy, and because sometimes people don't know how to do the teaching part, even though they've lived long enough to know how to do the things. So maybe that's not actually the failure I thought it was. There's this guy named Robert who works at the grocery store. He's older, I'd guess he's in his 60s, and he's been working at that grocery store for 20-some years. He works in the produce section. Every time I go in, he's arranging apples or organizing the lettuce or cleaning the misting system on the vegetables, making sure everything stays fresh. One day, maybe 3 months ago, I was in there buying some tomatoes, and I asked him, "Did you ever teach your kids anything about taking care of things?" He looked at me like I'd asked him something in another language. He said, "Like what?" And I said, "I don't know. Like how to grow things, or how to know when something's no good, or when to throw something away." Robert thought about this for a long time. He was holding a head of romaine lettuce, and he was just kind of looking at it while he thought. Then he said, "My daughter, she doesn't even eat vegetables. She's always on her phone. I don't think she's learned anything from me except how to be tired." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, "Well, you're pretty good at it." And he said, "At what?" "At knowing when things are good and when they're not. I can always tell the vegetables here are better than at the other store." He kind of smiled and he set the lettuce down gently like it was something precious. He said, "Thank you for saying that, but I don't know if my daughter has ever noticed. We didn't talk for very long after that, but I thought about that conversation for days, because Robert was doing something real. He was learning something about the world, about care and attention, but there was no one there to pass it on to. Or maybe there was, but she didn't want to learn it that way. She was too busy being a person and trying to figure out her own life. I think that's what my dad was too, and what I am becoming, maybe. We're all just trying to figure it out, and we're all too busy, and we're all hoping that somehow the important things rub off on people without us having to sit down and explain them. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But here's what I know now that I didn't know when I was 16. The lessons are not in the words. The lessons are not in the sitting down and the explaining and the patient instruction necessarily. Sometimes, maybe usually, the lessons are in the witnessing. They're in watching someone do something and seeing how they do it and noticing what matters to them. My dad never sat me down and said, "Here's how to be a man," or "Here's what's important," or any of those big things. But he went to work every day. For 40 years he went to work. He didn't complain about it, at least not in front of me. He just did it. He came home tired and he didn't have much left to give, but he was there. He was in the house. He ate dinner with us. He existed in the space we all shared, even if he couldn't bring much energy to it. And that was a lesson. It was a lesson about responsibility. It was a lesson about showing up even when you're tired. It was a lesson about work and what it costs, and how sometimes the cost is almost everything, but you do it anyway because you have to, and because maybe that's what love looks like sometimes. Not the big gestures, but just the showing up. The thing about being busy, which I've only recently started to understand, is that it's not always bad. Being busy is sometimes how people survive. It's sometimes how they keep from thinking too hard about things that might fall apart if they thought about them too hard. My dad was busy because that was his job, but I also think he was busy because it was easier than being at home. It was easier than sitting down and talking to me about things that he didn't know how to talk about. It was easier than feeling the weight of everything. His marriage, which was complicated, his responsibilities, his own doubts about whether he was doing okay at any of it. I understand that now. I understand it in a way that I didn't when I was 16, and I just thought he was mean or absent. And I think that's actually one of the lessons that did get passed down. Not intentionally, not in words, but in the way that I also sometimes get very busy, and I also sometimes use work as a way to not think about things that are difficult. I inherited that, not from genetics but from watching, so maybe that's a thing we should talk about. The lessons that are negative, the things that get passed down that we don't want to pass down. Because those happen too. We inherit the bad habits and the avoidance strategies and the ways of making things smaller so they don't hurt as much. But here's the thing that's interesting. Knowing about them doesn't always stop you from doing them. I've been thinking about that shovel with the cracked handle, and I've been thinking about what it would look like to fix it, to actually sit down with the tools and the time and the intention to fix something that someone gave you. I haven't done it yet. The shovel is still leaning against the garage and the crack is still there, but I'm planning to. I'm planning to take some time, maybe this weekend or next weekend or whenever the time comes when I'm not too busy, and I'm going to fix that handle. And I'm going to think about my dad while I do it. Not in an angry way, but in a way that has both kindness and sadness in it. I'm going to think about all the times he handed me things without explanation and left me to figure them out. And I'm going to think about how that wasn't ideal, but it also wasn't the worst thing. Because the truth is, you do learn by doing. You do learn by making mistakes. You do learn by feeling the weight of something in your hands and understanding, through your body and your experience, what it means and how to do it. And maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Maybe my dad knew, on some level, that the best thing he could give me wasn't words or time or careful instruction. Maybe the best thing he could give me was the necessity to figure it out. Because figuring it out is what makes you real. That's what makes you able to stand on your own. There's also another side to it, and I don't want to let my dad completely off the hook here. Because there are things that do need to be taught. There are things that kids need to hear from their parents, whether it's a dad or a mom, or anyone who's taking care of them. They need to hear that they're loved. They need to hear it in words, not just in actions. They need to hear that it's okay to be confused. That adults are confused too. That you don't have to have it all figured out. They need to hear how to be kind when no one's watching. How to be honest when it would be easier to lie. How to ask for help. How to admit when you're wrong. These are the lessons that my dad didn't teach me. Not because he was busy or tired or didn't know how, but because I don't think he knew how to say them. And I think that's different. That's a kind of absence that actually matters. So I'm not going to pretend that it was fine. I'm going to say that it wasn't fine. It was just incomplete. It was just limited. It was what he could manage, and it wasn't enough. But it was also not nothing. When I was a kid, I used to watch my dad in the morning before he left for work. He'd be standing in front of the bathroom mirror, and he'd be tying his tie. This is when I was maybe 10 or 11, and he'd stand there in front of the mirror, and he'd pull the tie tight around his neck, and he'd adjust it so it was sitting right, and then he'd turn away and grab his jacket and his keys and he'd leave. And I remember thinking, I'm going to look like that someday. I'm going to stand in front of a mirror and tie a tie and leave for work. I do. I stand in front of a mirror, and I do this thing that he did, except I learned how to do it from the internet, from some calm man on YouTube explaining the steps. And sometimes when I'm doing it, I think about my dad, and I think about how he was passing something on, even though he wasn't trying to. He was just existing. He was just being a man in front of a mirror, doing something every day, and I was watching. And that's actually really something. Let me tell you about a morning I had last week. I woke up, and the light was coming through the window in this particular way that only happens in late autumn or early winter. It's very clear and very sharp, because the sun is lower in the sky. And I was lying in bed, and I was thinking about nothing in particular, and I noticed that there was dust moving through the light. Actually moving, you could see it. All these tiny particles just floating through the light beam like they were alive, like they were little creatures with their own intentions. And I thought, my dad probably never noticed that. And then I thought, maybe I'm always being busy. This little thing, this small beauty that you can only see if you're slow enough to see it. And then I thought, or maybe he saw it all the time and never thought to mention it to me. And then I thought, or maybe noticing things like that is part of what happens when you're not busy. Maybe it's a luxury. Maybe my dad couldn't afford to notice because he was too busy trying to keep everything together. I don't know which one is true. Probably it depends on the day. But I do know that I watched the dust for a long time, and I felt grateful for it. In a quiet way. I felt grateful that I had the time to see it, and that nothing was pulling me away from seeing it. And I thought about my dad in his bedroom, in the dark, getting ready to go to work. And I thought about how I'm glad I'm not doing that. Not because I'm better than him, but because I was lucky enough to live in a time and in a way where I could make different choices. That's not his fault. That's not even anything he taught me. It's just luck. Okay. So I want to talk about something that's been bothering me, and I don't know if I'll be able to explain it well, but I'm going to try. There's this thing that happens when you become an adult and you start to understand your parents. And the thing is, understanding them doesn't make the hurt go away. It just complicates it. It makes it sadder in some ways, because you realize that they didn't fail you on purpose. They failed you because they were limited. They were limited by their circumstances, their own upbringing, their own pain. And knowing that doesn't fix the fact that they failed you. It just makes you feel sad about a bigger thing. You feel sad not just for yourself, but for them too. You feel sad for the whole chain of people not knowing how to teach each other, not knowing how to say the important things. My grandfather was a farmer. I don't know very much about him. He died when I was young, but I know that he was a very quiet man, and I know that my dad grew up on a farm. And I know that farming is hard work, and it doesn't leave much time for teaching your children anything except how to work. So my dad grew up learning how to work, and not learning how to talk, and then he became a manager at a factory, and he continued that pattern. He knew how to work, he didn't know how to talk. And so when I came along, I inherited that. I inherited a way of being that is very focused on productivity and doing and accomplishing, and not very good at sitting still and being and sharing what's inside. And now I'm an adult, and I'm trying to break that chain. I'm trying to be someone who doesn't need to be busy all the time. I'm trying to be someone who can sit and notice dust in the light. I'm trying to be someone who can have conversations about feelings and not feel like it's a waste of time. But it's hard, because I'm also very tired, and there's always something to do, and the pull to be busy is very strong. Here's something I've been meaning to tell you, and I'm not sure how to say it, so I'm just going to say it. I don't think your dad taught you everything you need to know. I think he probably failed you in some ways. I think he was probably busy and tired and not paying attention to the things that really mattered. I think he probably said things he didn't mean to say and didn't say things that he should have said. But also, he did the best he could, and the best he could was probably better than you thought at the time, even if it didn't feel like it. And here's the part that's hard. You're going to do the same thing to other people. You're going to be busy and tired and you're going to fail to teach people things, and you're going to leave gaps that they're going to have to fill on their own. You're going to hand someone a shovel and walk away, metaphorically speaking, and you're going to hope that they figure it out. That's not an excuse. That's just a thing that's true. I went to the grocery store again yesterday, and I saw Robert in the produce section. He was organizing oranges into a pyramid, the way they do sometimes, where each orange sits in a little spot on the ones below it. It was very precise work. It required attention, and I stopped and watched him for a minute, and I could see that he was really doing it with care. He really cared that those oranges were stacked right. And I thought about what he'd said about his daughter, about how she wasn't learning anything from him except how to be tired. But I don't think that's true anymore. I think she's learning something. I think she's learning, whether she knows it or not, that there are people in the world who care about small things, who care about whether the vegetables are fresh and beautiful, who spend their time making sure that the people who come into the grocery store have a good experience, even if they never notice, even if they never say thank you. That's a lesson. That's something worth learning. My dad is 75 years old now. He's been retired for 5 years, and I think retirement has been hard for him, because he spent 50 years being defined by his job, by being busy, by having a reason to get up in the morning. Ibrahim, and now he doesn't. Now he has free time, and he doesn't know what to do with it. I think that's sad. I think that's a consequence of a life spent being too busy to think about what else you might want to do. But it's also not too late. He started going to a community center. He started taking classes in different things. He started having time to actually be present in a way that he never was when I was growing up. And we've been spending more time together, and it's weird because he's the same person, but now I have access to him in a way I didn't before. Last month, I was at his house, and we were sitting on his porch, looking out at his neighborhood, and there was this moment where I realized that he was actually trying. He was trying to slow down. He was trying to be present. He was trying to do the thing he never did when I was young, which was just sit with someone and not have an agenda. It wasn't perfect. There were still long silences, there were still things that didn't get said, but there was intention there. There was an attempt. And I realized that maybe that's what a lesson is sometimes. It's not something teaches you when you're young and receptive. It's something that someone shows you over time, even accidentally, even when they don't know that's what they're doing. My dad taught me, over 40 years, without saying very much at all, what it looks like to work hard and be tired and not know how to talk about it. And now, in the last few years, he's teaching me what it looks like to try to change that, to try to be different, to try to slow down. Both are lessons. I want to tell you about my house, because I think it's important to this story. It's an old house. It was built in 1952, and it's been lived in by a lot of people, and it shows. The floorboards creak, the windows are original, and they don't seal very well, so in winter you can feel the cold air coming through. The walls are plaster, not drywall, and there are cracks in them that look like they've been there for decades. I moved into this house by myself about 7 years ago, and at first I thought I would fix everything. I thought I would make it perfect. I thought I would do all these renovation projects and make it into something beautiful and new. But I haven't done any of that. I've learned to live with the creaks and the drafts and the cracks. And I think that's actually taught me something more valuable than if I'd fixed everything. Because the house isn't perfect, and neither am I. The house is old and has a history, and so do I. The house has lived through things, and has marks from all those things, and so have I. And I think that's what I finally understand about my dad, and about my grandfather, and about the whole chain of people. We're all just doing the best we can in houses that aren't perfect, with tools that we taught ourselves to use, with gaps in our knowledge that we have to fill on our own. That's okay. That's actually okay. The other day, I was thinking about teaching. I teach high school. I teach choir, actually, and also some music theory. And I'm very conscious when I'm teaching about whether I'm failing my students the way my dad failed me, whether I'm handing them things without explanation, whether I'm too busy or too tired to really be present. But I also think that there's a limit to what I can control. I can try to be present. I can try to explain things clearly. I can try to care about whether they're learning and whether they understand. But I can't make them understand. I can't make them care. I can't protect them from the experience of having to figure things out on their own. In choir, we work on these pieces of music, and some of them are very difficult. And the students have to practice on their own, and they have to figure out how to do things that their voice might not naturally want to do. And sometimes they get frustrated, and they want me to just fix it for them, to just tell them the one thing that will make it work. But I can't do that, because learning is in the struggle. Learning is in the doing it wrong, and then doing it again. Learning is in the practice, and that's something that my dad understood, I think. He understood, without maybe knowing he understood, that the most important lessons can't be taught. They can only be learned through time and effort and making mistakes. There's a song that we do in choir, and it's a very old song. It's from maybe the Renaissance, I think, and the lyrics are in Latin, and they're about the passage of time. And the melody is very beautiful because the words are about how time passes, and nothing stays the same, and everything changes. And every year, when we're getting ready to perform this song, I have to stand in front of the students and explain what the words mean. I have to explain that the song is about time, and that the people who wrote it understood something about time that maybe they're only now starting to understand. And I watch their faces, and most of them aren't really interested. They just want to know what notes to sing. But some of them, a few of them, they're listening. They're really listening to what I'm saying about time and change and how nothing stays the same. And then we sing the song, and sometimes when we're in the middle of singing it, something shifts, something changes, and for a moment it's not just a bunch of high school kids sitting in rows trying to hit the right notes. It's something bigger. It's people connecting to something that people have been connecting to for 500 years. It's people saying, I know about time. I know about change. I know about the sadness of things passing away. That's a lesson. That's teaching something without really teaching it. Okay, I think I need to come back around to the shovel now, because I've been away from it for a while, and I think that's where this whole thing has been going. The shovel is still leaning against the garage. The crack is still there. I've been thinking about it a lot, about what it would mean to fix it, about what it would mean to take the time to do that one small thing well. Because here's what I realize. Fixing the shovel is not really about the shovel. It's not about having a shovel that works well. It's about taking the time to care for something that someone gave me. It's about understanding that the things people give us matter, even if they don't give us an explanation with them. My dad gave me a shovel without saying anything. My dad went to work for 40 years without explaining why. My dad was quiet and busy and not always there. And that hurt me in some ways. That was a real absence. That was a real failure. But he also gave me something. He gave me the understanding that some things are learned through doing. He gave me the resilience of not having everything explained to me. He gave me the independence of figuring things out on my own. And now I'm an adult, and I have a shovel with a cracked handle, and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to spend an afternoon in my garage, probably listening to music, or maybe not listening to anything, just being quiet, just doing the work. And I'm going to fix that handle, and I'm going to think about my dad the whole time, and I'm going to understand, in the deepest part of myself, that he was doing the best he could, and that the best he could was enough. There's a moment that happens in the very early morning, right before the sun comes up, when the world is very quiet. And in that quiet, you can hear things that you can't usually hear. You can hear the refrigerator humming. You can hear the wind. You can hear the branches of the trees moving. I used to hear my dad in that moment. I used to hear him getting ready to go to work. I used to hear him moving around the house, trying to be quiet, trying not to wake everyone up. I used to hear the sound of him putting on his jacket. I used to hear the sound of the car starting, and then he would be gone. I'm much older now, and I don't hear that anymore because he's not waking up early to go to work. He's retired. He's sleeping in probably. He's probably still asleep when the sun comes up. But sometimes, in that early morning quiet, I think about that sound, the sound of him leaving, the sound of him going away to work, and I think about how that was a kind of teaching in a way. That was him showing me what it looks like to do your duty, to do the thing you have to do, even when you'd probably rather stay home, even when it's hard. And I've inherited that from him, whether I wanted to or not. I've inherited the understanding that sometimes you have to do things because they need to be done, not because they're fun or easy or fulfill you. And that's a useful thing to know. That's a valuable lesson. I keep thinking about Robert in the produce section, organizing things with care, and I keep thinking about what it would be like if his daughter suddenly woke up one day and understood what her father was trying to teach her. What it would be like if she understood that the care he takes with vegetables is the same care he probably takes with everything, the same care he probably takes with her, in the ways he knows how. I don't know if that will happen. She might grow up and become someone who doesn't care about things being organized or beautiful. She might become someone who just grabs things quickly and doesn't notice the care that goes into keeping them fresh. But she might also become someone who, much later in her life, is in a grocery store, and she sees someone working in the produce section, and she notices the care they take, and she thinks about her father, and she understands, finally, that he was trying to tell her something. It might take 20 years, it might take longer, but the lesson might still land. I'm trying to think about how to end this, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to have some big revelation or some neat conclusion, but I don't think I do. I think this is one of those things where there isn't a conclusion exactly, there's just an understanding that gets deeper the more you live. My dad never taught me most of the things that I needed to know. He wasn't present in the ways that I needed him to be present. He was busy and tired and not skilled at the emotional work that parenting requires. Those are just facts. They're not betrayals exactly, but they are failures. They are real absences. But he also taught me, without knowing it, how to be a person, how to show up, how to do difficult things even when they're not rewarding, how to stand in front of a mirror and do the thing that needs to be done, how to come home tired and still exist in a space with other people, even if you don't have much energy to give. And now I'm trying to unlearn some of that. I'm trying to be someone who can sit still, someone who can notice beauty, someone who can say the things that matter, someone who can be present in a way that my dad wasn't. But I'm also grateful for the things that he did teach me, even if I didn't recognize them as lessons at the time. Last night, I was standing in my kitchen, and it was maybe around 6 o'clock, when the light comes through the window in this particular way that makes everything look kind of gold. And I was making dinner, just something simple, pasta and vegetables, and I was thinking about my dad. I was thinking about how he used to come home from work, and he would sit down at the table, and my mom would put the food in front of him, and he would eat, just eat. He didn't talk much. He would eat, and then he would maybe ask how our day was, but not in a way where he seemed like he really wanted to know. It seemed like something he was supposed to say, like a line in a script, but he was there. He was at the table. He was present in his body, even if his mind was somewhere else, probably still at work, probably thinking about something that happened or something that might happen tomorrow. And now I understand that was probably the most he could give. That was probably all he had after spending a day being a manager, after spending a day managing people and problems and production numbers. That was what was left. And I stood in my kitchen, in that gold light, and I made pasta, and I thought about him, and I felt sad and grateful at the same time. I felt sad that he couldn't give more, and grateful that he gave what he could. I'm going to tell you about a conversation I had with one of my students. This girl, let's call her Maya, she came to me after class one day, and she said, "Sir, can I ask you something?" And I said, "Of course." And she said, "Do you think my dad loves me if he never comes to any of my concerts?" And I didn't know what to say. I stood there for a long moment, and I could see that she was trying very hard to be brave about it. But underneath that bravery was a lot of hurt. Ebro and I thought about my own dad. I thought about how he came to some of my events when I was in high school, and how I didn't really appreciate it at the time. I thought about how he was probably tired, and probably would rather have been at home, but he came anyway, and how I didn't give him credit for that until I was much older. I said to Maya, "I think it's complicated. I think sometimes parents have things that are keeping them busy, or things that they're struggling with, and it doesn't mean they don't love you. But I also think it's okay to feel hurt about it. Those two things can be true at the same time." She looked at me like I'd just given her permission to feel two different feelings at once, which I guess I had. And then she said, "My mom says he's just selfish." And I didn't want to confirm that because I don't know her dad. I don't know what's actually, but I also didn't want to defend him because her hurt is real and it's valid. So I said, "I don't think people are just one thing." I think your dad is probably doing the best he can, and he's also probably failing you in some ways. Both of those things are probably true. She didn't seem entirely satisfied with this answer, but she seemed like maybe it was helpful to her. And I thought, after she left, about how this is one of the most important things that I can teach, that people are complicated, and that you can love someone and also be hurt by them, and that understanding why someone is the way they are doesn't erase the hurt, but it might make it a little more bearable. My dad never taught me this. He never taught me how to hold complexity. He never taught me how to understand people as full human beings instead of just as roles they play. But I learned it anyway from living long enough to understand my own limitations, from being hurt and learning that the hurt doesn't always come from malice. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. Not something that someone teaches you, but something that you learn from experience, something that you learn from time. There's a thing that happens in November in this part of the country where everything kind of stops. The leaves are all down, the grass is brown, the world is waiting for snow. And in that waiting, there's this strange feeling. It's like time is suspended. It's like everything is on pause, waiting for the next thing. And I think people feel that too. I think there's a kind of pause that happens when you're waiting for winter, when you're waiting for the next chapter of your life, when you're waiting for something to change. I've been in that pause for a long time now. I've been waiting for winter to come, metaphorically speaking. I've been waiting for something and I'm not sure what. Maybe I'm waiting for my dad to teach me something. Maybe I'm waiting for me to teach myself something. Maybe I'm waiting for time to pass and my perspective to shift again. But I think the thing I'm actually learning in this pause is that the pause is the whole point. The pause is where the lesson is. The pause is where you notice things that you can't notice when you're busy. Okay, I'm going to tell you about something that happened in high school, and I'm not sure why I'm remembering this now, but I think it's important. I was in my dad's office, my dad's work office, not his office at home, because he didn't have an office at home. We went to his work one day, I can't remember why, maybe it was a Saturday, maybe he forgot something, and he showed me around. He showed me his desk and his files and the factory floor where all the machines were. And we were walking through the factory, and it was loud and chaotic. And there were all these people working, and my dad was pointing out different things to me, and I could see that he was proud of his work. He was proud of running this place. He was proud of the order that he'd created out of what would otherwise be chaos. And I remember thinking at the time that it was boring. It was loud and it smelled bad and none of it made sense to me. I wanted to leave. I remember being annoyed that I had to be there. But now I understand what he was doing. He was trying to show me what his life was. He was trying to make it make sense to me. He was trying to explain without exactly explaining why he was busy all the time, why he had to go to work, why the work mattered. And I was too young and too self-centered to really receive that gift. But he was trying. I think that's what a lot of these lessons are. They're attempts. They're incomplete attempts to pass on information or values or understanding. And sometimes they land, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes they land 20 years later when you're standing in your own kitchen in the gold light thinking about your dad. I want to go back to the shovel for a moment because I realized something about it that I haven't said yet. The handle is cracked, yes, but the shovel itself is still good. The blade is still sharp. The balance is still right. It still works even with the cracked handle. You can still use it to shovel snow. You can still do the job. And I think that's exactly what my dad gave me. Not a perfect set of instructions, not a complete education in how to be a human, but something that works. Something that, even with the cracks and the imperfections, you can still use. You can still do the work with it. And maybe that's all anyone can give anyone. Maybe that's the best anyone can hope for. There's something about becoming an adult that's really strange, and I don't think anyone prepares you for it. No one teaches you that one day you're going to be as old as your parents seemed when you were young, and you're going to understand how young they actually were, how limited, how afraid. I'm not my dad's age yet, but I'm getting close to being his age when I was 16, and I'm starting to understand what that must have been like, to have a job that required everything, to have a family that required everything, to have nothing left to give at the end of the day, to go to bed at night and worry about whether you were doing it right. And I think that understanding, that empathy, is actually the most important lesson my dad taught me. He taught me it by failing me. He taught me what it looks like to be overwhelmed. And now I'm trying not to be overwhelmed. Now I'm trying to be different. But I also understand that it's hard. I understand that it's a choice you have to make consciously every day to not get pulled into the current of busy. Let me tell you what I think the real lesson is. The real lesson that your busy dad didn't teach you, but that you're going to have to learn on your own, just like everyone else. The real lesson is this: you have to teach yourself. You have to be brave enough to look at the gaps in your education, in your understanding, and you have to decide to fill them yourself. You have to read books, you have to ask people questions, you have to try things and fail at them. You have to feel your back hurt from shoveling snow and understand what that means. You have to stand in front of a mirror and figure out how to tie a tie, and then tie it every day for the rest of your life. And sometimes you're going to do it wrong. Sometimes you're going to learn the wrong lesson. Sometimes you're going to become a version of your busy dad, even though you swore you wouldn't. But sometimes, if you're paying attention, you're going to learn something real. You're going to learn something that's actually useful. You're going to learn something that you can pass on. I'm thinking about my students again, and I'm thinking about how they're all going to have busy parents or negligent parents, or parents who hurt them in some way. And they're going to grow up thinking that there's something wrong with them, or something wrong with their parents. And in some ways they'll be right, and in some ways they'll be wrong. And I hope that one day, maybe in 20 years, maybe in 30 years, they're going to be standing in a kitchen or a grocery store or a garden, and they're going to understand something about their parent that they didn't understand before. And they're going to understand that love is complicated. And they're going to understand that people do the best they can, and sometimes the best they can is not very good, but it's not nothing either. And I hope that gives them some peace. I hope that gives them the ability to forgive. Not because the hurt wasn't real, but because forgiveness is what makes you free to become something other than your pain. All right, I think I need to wrap this up, because I've been talking for a long time, and I can feel the sun starting to go down. I can feel the day shifting into evening, and that's always when I think about my dad. That's always when I think about all the days he came home from work and sat at the table and tried to be present even though he was exhausted. Hey, Broker, I'm going to fix that shovel soon. I'm going to take it into my garage, and I'm going to get my tools, and I'm going to figure out how to replace the handle or repair it or whatever needs to be done. And I'm going to do it slowly, and I'm going to do it well, because that's what you do when something matters to you. You take time with it. And while I'm doing it, I'm going to think about my dad. I'm going to think about him standing in front of the mirror, tying his tie. I'm going to think about him handing me the shovel without explanation. I'm going to think about him sitting at the dinner table, tired and trying. I'm going to understand fully and completely that he did what he could, and that what he could do was enough to keep me alive, to keep me functional, to keep me pointed in a direction where I could become a person who knows how to do things. And maybe that's all we can ask of anyone. Maybe that's all that love really is sometimes. Just showing up, just existing in the space, just handing over the tools and trusting that the other person will figure it out. You know what I realized this morning? I realized that my dad probably felt very alone. I realized that he probably went to work every day and felt like no one understood what he was doing or why he was doing it. I realized that he probably came home and felt like his family didn't really know him, because he didn't have the words to tell them who he was. I realized that he probably died a little bit every day, in the sense that he just kept doing the same thing over and over, and he never got to become the person he might have wanted to be. And that's sad. That's really sad, and I'm angry about it, a little bit. Not at him, but at the system that made him that way, at the world that made it so that he had to work so hard, that he couldn't be the father he probably wanted to be. But anger doesn't change anything. So I'm just going to feel sad about it. I'm going to sit with that sadness, and I'm going to understand that his loneliness was real, and that my hurt about his absence is also real, and that both things can be true at the same time. There's this song we do in choir, a different one than the one I mentioned before, and the words are English, and they go like this: "What you did for the least of these, you did for me." And it's from the Bible, but that's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the idea that every small action matters, Every small kindness matters, every small moment of attention matters. My dad might not have taught me very much in the traditional sense, but he taught me that I should go to work. He taught me that responsibilities matter. He taught me that you can be tired and still show up. He taught me that doing the same thing over and over for a long time is a form of love. It's a form of commitment. And that might not sound like much, but it is. It's actually everything. I want you to know that I'm not sad anymore. Not right now. I'm just tired. In the same way that my dad was tired. I'm tired from talking about this and thinking about this and understanding this over and over again. I'm tired from the weight of all these thoughts, but it's a good tired. It's the kind of tired that comes from doing something that matters. It's the kind of tired that my dad probably felt every day. And maybe that's something I understand about him that I didn't before. Maybe that's something I inherited that I can actually appreciate now. I think it's almost evening now. I think I've been talking a long time, and I haven't solved anything. I haven't come up with a way for you to get over the fact that your dad was busy and unavailable and never taught you how to be a person. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that you have to teach yourself. Maybe the point is that the gap is actually where the lesson lives. Maybe the point is that your dad was doing the best he could, and you're doing the best you can, and everyone is always doing the best they can, even when the best they can is not very good. And maybe one day you're going to be teaching someone else, and you're going to fail them in some ways too. You're going to be busy, you're going to be tired, you're going to hand them a shovel without explanation and walk away, and they're going to have to figure it out on their own. And maybe that's not a failure. Maybe that's just what it means to be human. Maybe that's just what it means to be alive and doing your best with limited time and limited energy and limited understanding. When I was very young, I must have been maybe 5 or 6, I remember sitting on my dad's lap one time, just sitting there. I don't remember why. I don't remember what we were doing. I just remember that he was warm and he was solid and he was there, and I remember feeling safe. I remember that feeling very clearly. And then I grew up, and I didn't sit on his lap anymore, and the moments of closeness became more rare. And I remember feeling hurt about that, like he had taken something away from me by becoming too busy to be that warm, solid presence. But now I'm wondering if maybe the problem isn't that he took it away. Maybe the problem is just that I grew up. Maybe the problem is that children sit on their parents' laps and then they don't, and that's just what happens. That's just time passing. That's just the way the world works. And maybe the thing that my dad taught me, without knowing it, is what it's like to love someone even when you can't always be present for them. It's like what it's like to know someone and not really understand them. It's like what it's like to share a life with someone and still feel separate from them. And that's not a bad lesson to learn. That's actually a really important lesson. I'm going to tell you a story about snow. Last winter we had this enormous snowstorm. It snowed for like 3 days straight, and the snow just kept piling up. And when I went outside to shovel, I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't going to be able to do it all at once. I was going to have to do it over and over again many times just to keep up with the snow. So I started shoveling, and I would shovel for maybe 30 minutes or an hour, and then I would go inside and have some hot chocolate, and then I would go back outside and shovel some more. And I did this over and over for 3 days. What I noticed was that the work was meditative. The work was actually kind of nice. There was something satisfying about the repetition. There was something satisfying about making progress, even though the progress was always going to be undone by more snow. And I thought about my dad, and how he went to work for 40 years, and how every day was kind of like that. You do the work, and then the next day there's more work, and you do that again and again for a whole lifetime. And somehow that's okay. Somehow that's actually what life is. I'm going to finish with this. My dad never taught me most of the things that I think I needed to learn, but he taught me that you can get up in the dark, and you can go to work, and you can come home, and you can be present for your family. And I'm trying to learn that lesson without destroying myself in the process. I'm trying to learn how to be present without losing myself. I'm trying to learn how to work without being consumed by work. And I'm failing sometimes. I'm busy too. I'm tired too. I'm doing the best I can, just like he did. And the shovel is still in my garage with a cracked handle, and I'm still going to fix it. And when I do, I'm going to understand that every time I use it, I'm using something that my dad gave me, and I'm using something that I fixed myself, and I'm using something that contains both of us in it. His inability to really teach me, and my ability to figure things out on my own. That's going to be enough. That's going to be everything. It's almost dark now. I can see the sun starting to disappear over the horizon. In a few minutes it's going to be evening, and then it's going to be night, and tomorrow it's going to be light again, and I'm going to get up and do something, and my dad is going to get up and do something, and we're all going to keep going. And that's okay. That's actually more than okay. That's life. Thank you for listening.